Rahul for Punch Out Boxing, joined by my esteemed colleague Dave Johal after a tumultuous weekend of boxing at Wembley. For once, we weren't there, but needless to say, we were both watching glued to our screens. And what a heavyweight slugfest. Frank Warren said it'd be like Hagler Hearns, but with two giants going at it. Thought that was just marketing. Don't know about you. I couldn't imagine that it would really turn out that way.
From the opening bell, Daniel Dubois jumped on Anthony Joshua. Um, what, despite it was a great fight for what it lasted. I mean, it gave us drama. Anthony in round five really went for it as well.
Hmm.
And we'll talk about what happened and our reactions and what happens with each person afterwards. But the fight certainly delivered. I think the card on the whole delivered. Albeit one or two strange scorecards when we look at the Joshua Buatsi result. To be fair, that was a very strange scorecard. But overall, it was a fantastic night of boxing, but in particular heavyweight boxing, because again, we will talk about fights that reshape the division. This is one of those fights that have reshaped the division because not many people actually gave Daniel Dubois um, a chance. He was the underdog going in. Strange as well that he was the champion, but he came out first.
Yeah.
So that was a bit odd. But clearly the B side, and I think yesterday's fight has appealed to the masses because if you didn't know who Daniel Dubois was, you certainly know who he is now after that performance. What are your thoughts about the actual fight and the result, first of all? Were you shocked?
Surprised. I can't say it's the biggest shock ever because we have, of course, seen AJ get stopped before. So we know he can be hurt. And Daniel is a huge puncher. I think, did we talk about this in the pre-fight analysis that maybe AJ was an overwhelming favorite more based on his star power than anything? If you were to actually analyze their recent fights, as people have pointed out, Daniel had beaten the better fighters more recently. But I did actually think AJ, with all of his experience at the top level, would know how to handle Daniel, that he'd know and be well aware of the dangers his punching power brings and would have a suitable fight plan for that. But as it turns out, it was Don Charles who had the right fight plan. Frank Warren's wanted this fight for many years, and now we know why. Just stylistically, I guess what Daniel does, and now especially with his dad in his corner. I mean, I think right from the ring walk, the difference in their demeanor told. There was a lot of talk about, well, could Daniel cope with the first time, headlining the big event, all of that. His ring walk, he looks totally comfortable. Um, Whereas if anything, AJ looked somewhat I don't know, hesitant maybe. I don't know. He certainly didn't have a spring in his step, I didn't think. And
He
maybe
just
that,
couldn't let anything get off, was he? He wasn't allowed. I think Daniel Dubois showed him no respect from the opening bell, which was a fantastic tactic.
yeah.
I disagree with you in one respect, which was the ring walk, because I saw him laser focused. It
Mhm.
wasn't where, in hindsight, where I look back, and also actually on the fight when as it was happening with Andy Ruiz, there was something that was just off. The
Mhm.
ring walk, there was just something off as well. And one of our colleagues from Boxing Raps, sorry, Raps on TV. He was there at Madison Square Garden when AJ lost to Ruiz, and he was texting me, telling me what was going on whilst the fight was happening. And he said something just seems off. This is pre AJ getting stopped. This is prior to him. Sorry, this is when he was walking into the ring, and he says just something just seems off.
Mhm.
But I didn't get that from this. I think he looked razor sharp, but I don't think he recovered after that first knockdown. What do you think? Do you think he needed an
Mm,
or two to recover? Obviously, rules that would never happen, but he just never recovered after that first round, did he?
exactly that. That's been a criticism of AJ ever since that first knockdown against Klitschko, that when he gets hit, he stays hit. Now, when he fights conservative fighters, like Klitschko, they give him enough time and space that he can sort of fiddle his way to the end of the round and then have another round to recover, whatever. But as you said, Daniel in the prime of his youth, brimming with confidence, just didn't let up. And so yeah, was it almost as soon as the second round started, AJ was down again. And yeah, I think at that point, yeah, I think his senses were really pretty much scrambled. And for the rest of the fight, I'm inclined to think at that point, whatever fight plan he had was out, and it was just instinct at that point. And I think that's why eventually he did get knocked out because technique, strategy, it was all gone. His mind weren't thinking clearly.
No, and I think when it came to the actual finishing blow, should we just say as well,
Mhm.
led in with a lead uppercut, leaving himself completely wide open, which it looked like a really emotional shot, which is what you just said there, which is fighting on instinct and heart and
Yeah.
passion, and technique was out the window at that point because throwing such an well, it was a punch from the gods. He gambled with that shot, and he hurt Daniel Dubois as well. Let's be honest. Daniel's legs did stumble slightly, and I thought, here we go. We're going to see a knockdown. We could see a finish here. It could turn round. But as the lead uppercut was thrown, Daniel Dubois clipped him, and that was over. I mean, looking at the finish as well, Anthony Joshua has never been finished in that manner, which is completely knocked out.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting as well for the haters out there was you could see he was actually trying to get up, but his body just wouldn't allow it. His
Mm,
body was, you cannot get up, and it was heartbreaking to watch as well. But also at the same time, it was great to see the younger person, Daniel Dubois, solidify himself in the top mix now. To be fair as well, and then when you look at the making of Daniel Dubois, it all changed after the loss from Alexander Usyk under Don Charles's tutelage. I mean, look at the fights they've been involved in since Daniel Dubois beat Lorena. He's been on a good roll, hasn't he, Rob?
absolutely. I mean, Don Charles has done great with him, but I think also a pivotal factor in him now delivering at the top level is having his father in his corner. If you remember against Miller, I think it was after the fourth round, Frank Warren now famously told his dad, go and sit by the corner. And in the post-fight interview, Daniel pretty much admitted that. He said, yeah, when I heard my dad tell me to step it up, I knew it's time to go to work. So for whatever reason, he needs to hear his dad's authoritative voice, to reach his, to reach into that top level that he's got the physical tools to. So, and that's why I think having his dad there against both Hergovich and AJ, he's got in there totally confident, not intimidated by them or the occasion, and he's delivered. Yeah, you're right. It was heartbreaking as an AJ fan. Um, I don't know about you. I think it's looking like the end of an era. Because if truth be told, it probably is the end of AJ being in the States for being the top heavyweight. I certainly don't think his career's over. But after a defeat like that, you've got to say the world title picture is a long way off. And at 34, with a queue of hungry lions like Daniel Dubois all queuing up to have a go, it's unlikely he'll ever get back to that point. So in that sense, it was a bit sad. Um, but as you said, for Daniel Dubois coming of age, and I think he's going to be a force at heavyweight for a long, long time.
Yeah, beginning of a new era. But interesting as well, AJ's fights after the second defeat to Usyk, we've had Franklin, we've had Hellenius in there, Wallin, Ngannou.
Hmm.
Ngannou, I felt, even though Anthony Joshua was a clear, massive favourite on in fight night for fighting a somewhat novice, should we just say, in boxing, not in combat sports, but in boxing. That gave him the confidence, though, and I
Hmm.
think that's what propelled him into being the the favorite for this fight. I thought, he'd do the business within seven. That's not to discredit Daniel Dubois, but I thought experience would have done it. But the main question, were you surprised, first of all, that AJ said that he's going to continue? Was that a
No,
surprise to you or a shock?
no, not at all. Because look, we know it's a story as old as this sport. Top level fighters never bow out at the right time, do they? Very few do. And after a defeat like that, no former champion wants to go out with the last image of them being flat on their face. So I don't think there was ever any chance he would pack it in after a defeat like that. And in the greater scheme of things, I don't think he's got that many miles on the clock. Yeah, it was a bad defeat, but really the only two batterings he's taken in his career has been that fight against Dubois and the Ruiz one. So I don't think every heavyweight can do that to him. Uh, let's not forget a lot of people who've sparred with all the top heavyweights, including Daniel, they say actually Dubois might be the hardest single hitter in the game. So it doesn't mean everyone can do that to AJ. So, but let's see. There's talk of him activating a rematch clause, which I don't think would be a wise decision. So
No, I mean I'm surprised there is a there. I mean it's a wise move to have the rematch clause to have options on the table. I mean, look, if this is the Daniel Dubois era after, what the outcome of Usyk versus Fury and whatever happens there on December 21st,
mhm.
depending on how long Daniel Dubois is in the game, depending on who he fights next, because that's going to shape everything. You could have this played out in years to come with Moses Satuma versus Daniel Dubois, depending on how this, and that could be the next passing of the torch.
Yeah,
We don't know what Delicious is going to be doing as well. Famously bowed out of the Olympics at a very early stage on a controversial decision. He
yeah.
could be a player in the game as well. There's so much stuff going on, but this I feel is one of those fights which has defined the heavyweight era.
Yeah.
Fights left for Anthony Joshua. I mean, what do you think? Joe Joyce, is that a credible fight? The Wilder fight looks interesting now, doesn't it? So does Joseph Parker. Zhang is still there as well, but Zhang is on a high, even though he lost to Parker. Million dollar question: are people still interested in the Fury fight? Does that still make sense to do that, settle that, and then people go their separate ways?
I think so. I think most of those names you mentioned are credible. I think it will depend how Fury Usyk goes. If Fury can pull off a win, then I doubt the AJ fight will happen next. There'll probably be a rubber match with Usyk. Yeah, I think, like you said, Wilder, Joyce, these are guys who, like AJ, fallen by the wayside in terms of the top level. So they'd be credible as next opponents. And yeah, if Fury loses, then it's sort of battle of the old guard in Britain, because it won't be a battle for who was best in the world, because that's been established then as Usyk. So I think that's the direction I'd like to see him go if he does well, he is going to fight on. As for Daniel Dubois, well, as you said, world's his oyster now, and there's no shortage of young upcomers. So yeah, well, he's still young. They can pretty much do what they like from here on. So yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, some people are saying when this era's done, it's going to be boring. I don't think so. I think it's actually going to get more interesting because you've got the youngsters and no shortage of them coming through. So it's actually probably going to become more interesting. So yeah, watch this space. The heavyweight division is well and truly alive, even if that old guard are sadly on their way out.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the last few years, the torch was passed from Lennox Lewis to the Klitschko brothers. The Klitschko brothers passed that torch over to Tyson Fury and AJ. They then passed it over to Usyk. Should we just say, let's be totally honest, that's been divided now between Usyk and Dubois, and who knows what's going to happen next.
Mm,
And it's a nice passing of the torch. Um, but yeah, there you have it. Interesting night. Not so much shocked, but it was shocking in the manner for me
yeah.
in the way AJ lost. But fair play to Daniel Dubois, a career-defining performance there as well. Um, and hopefully, Anthony Joshua makes the right decisions, whether he fights or doesn't fight. I mean, he has said he does fight and will carry on, so fair play to him as well. Um, so what have we got on for this week, Rob? Do you want to introduce what
Yeah.
you've got on for the busy
Busy,
schedule?
busy week back on the domestic scene. So York Hall doubleheader Friday and Saturday. Friday night we've got Wasserman's excellent show. We've got that bantamweight European title fight between Charlie Edwards and Thomas Somba. That's got an added bit of extra spice because Charlie Edwards' younger brother Sonny is in the opposite corner. So that's going to be really interesting, and there's some great fights on the undercard of that. And then of course our friends at TM14 Promotions, they've got their show on Saturday night. Some great Southern area title fights and local prospects. So a busy weekend for us there. What about yourself up north?
So yeah, Midland stroke up north. We should be getting confirmation. Hopefully, we'll be going to Matchroom's world title fight between Rhiannon Dixon and Terry Harper in Sheffield on Saturday night. So we'll get some footage for you from there as well, and hopefully some footage from the fight week as well. And who knows, we may even talk to Eddie Hearn and get his thoughts about not just the card in Sheffield, but also uh, get his thoughts on Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. What's next, the heavyweight division, and this this back and forth with Ben Shalom that we've seen as well, which has been quite interesting to be fair. But yeah, busy schedule ahead, loads to talk about and think about. But just a message for the fans, just very finally in terms of, I'd have to say, there's so many, should we just say, fickle fans sometimes in the sport. Let's remember how how we got into the sport and why we follow certain boxes, and we take their wins, we take their losses, and fair play. It takes a lot of balls, should we just say, to step in the ring. Um, so yeah, watch the space next week. It's going to be a good week for us, and catch up with you guys soon.
We will speak soon. Thanks for your